So Sean, after everything you've built, Bad Boy Records, the fashion empire, the business ventures, what keeps you up at night? Marcus leaned back in his chair, expecting another polished answer about market strategies or future projects. But something shifted in Diddy's eyes. The confident mogul who had walked into the studio just minutes before seemed to crumble before the cameras. His hand started trembling slightly as he gripped the arms of his chair. "Marcus," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I wouldn't say a word." His voice cracked on the last word. Marcus leaned forward, sensing something profound was happening. "What do you mean?" Diddy's eyes were beginning to glisten. The cameras caught every detail as he struggled to maintain his composure. "I'd fall to my knees," he said, his voice thick with emotion. He couldn't hide anymore. The confession seemed to surprise even Diddy himself. He blinked rapidly, as if trying to process what he'd just admitted on live television. This wasn't the Sean Combs the world knew, the confident entrepreneur, the man who turned hip-hop into $1 billion empire. This was someone else entirely. That's not what I expected you to say," Marcus said gently, his own voice softer now. The energy in the room had shifted completely. What started as a standard interview had become something much more intimate, much more real. Diddy wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, a gesture so human it made everyone in the studio hold their breath. "I've been running from this conversation my whole life," he said, looking directly into the camera, "but I can't anymore." The production assistant behind the camera made a subtle gesture to Marcus. Should they cut? But Marcus shook his head almost imperceptibly. This was the story of a lifetime unfolding before their eyes. "What conversation?" Marcus asked, though he already sensed the answer would change everything. Diddy took a shaky breath, and for the first time in decades, he looked vulnerable, completely, utterly vulnerable. "The one about faith, about God, about the thing I've been afraid to admit even to myself." The silence that followed was deafening. In studios across the country, producers were frantically calling their networks. Social media was already exploding with clips of the moment. But in that room, there was only Sean Combs, finally ready to tell the truth he'd been hiding for 40 years. "I need to tell you something," Diddy said, his voice steadier now but still thick with emotion. "Something I've never told anyone before." Marcus nodded encouragingly, and Diddy continued, his hands trembling slightly as he spoke. "When I was 7 years old, I had an experience that changed everything, but I buried it so deep that I convinced myself it never happened." Diddy paused, looking out at the cameras as if seeing them for the first time. "I was staying with my grandmother in Harlem. She was very religious, the kind of woman who prayed before every meal and read her Bible every night. The studio was so quiet you could hear the hum of the equipment. Everyone sensed they were witnessing something unprecedented. I was sick with a fever, really sick. My grandmother stayed up all night praying over me." Diddy's voice grew softer, more distant, as if he was being transported back to that night. "Somewhere around 3 o'clock in the morning, I woke up and saw a figure standing at the foot of my bed." Marcus felt his pulse quicken. "What kind of figure?" "A man, tall, wearing white robes. His face was—" Diddy struggled for words. "It was the most peaceful face I'd ever seen. He didn't say anything at first. He just looked at me with these eyes that seemed to see right through me, but not in a scary way, in a loving way." Tears were flowing freely down Diddy's cheeks now, but he didn't seem to notice or care. "He reached out and touched my forehead, and I felt this warmth spread through my entire body. The fever broke instantly, but that's not the part that changed me." "What was?" Marcus whispered. "He spoke to me, just 3 words." Diddy's voice was barely audible now. He said, "I'll be waiting." The implications of those words hung heavy in the air. Marcus realized he was holding his breath. "When I woke up the next morning, I was completely healthy. My grandmother said it was a miracle, but I was just a kid, and kids don't always understand miracles. I told myself it was just a dream, just the fever making me see things." Diddy wiped his eyes again, but more tears kept coming. "I spent the next 33 years convincing myself it was just a hallucination. I threw myself into music, into business, into things I could control and build and measure. I told myself that if I could just make enough money, sign enough artists, build enough brands, I could outrun that night." Marcus leaned forward. "But you couldn't." "No," Diddy said, shaking his head. "The harder I ran, the louder those words got. I'll be waiting. Every platinum album, every business deal, every time I thought I'd finally proven I didn't need faith, those words were there." The raw honesty in Diddy's voice was stunning. This wasn't a calculated PR moment or a carefully crafted image. This was a man finally admitting to something that had haunted him for decades. There's more, Diddy said, looking directly at Marcus. Something that happened just 3 weeks ago that made me realize I couldn't run anymore. Marcus waited, sensing that whatever came next would be even more explosive than what they'd already heard. 3 weeks ago, I was at a music industry conference in Los Angeles. Record executives, producers, artists from around the world, discussing the future of entertainment. Diddy's voice was stronger now, as if telling the story was giving him strength. I was giving a keynote about brand building and cultural influence, all the usual stuff. He paused, running his hand over his head, but right in the middle of my presentation, I started talking about something else entirely. I don't even remember making the decision to change topics. The words just started coming out of my mouth. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. What did you say? I started talking about purpose, about how all our success and influence is meaningless if we don't address the deeper questions of human existence, about how we're all just running from the same thing, the question of whether there's something bigger than ourselves. Diddy's eyes had a distant look, as if he was reliving that moment. The audience was stunned. These are people who live and breathe entertainment and business. And here I was talking about spiritual emptiness and the human need for divine connection. How did they react? That's the strange part. After my presentation, dozens of people came up to me privately. Artists, executives, producers, and they all said the same thing. They felt it too. This emptiness, this sense that despite all our achievements, we're missing something fundamental. Diddy leaned forward, his voice becoming more urgent. One rapper who sold millions of albums told me he'd been having dreams about Jesus for months. A label executive said she'd been reading the Bible in secret for years, afraid to tell anyone because it would hurt her reputation in the industry. The weight of these revelations was palpable. Marcus realized he was witnessing not just a personal confession, but a glimpse into a hidden spiritual crisis affecting some of the most influential people in entertainment. But that's not what broke me, Diddy continued. What broke me happened on the flight home. Marcus waited, every muscle tense with anticipation. I was sitting alone in my private jet, thinking about that conference, about all those people who were secretly searching for the same thing I was. And suddenly I heard that voice again, not audibly, but in my heart, clear as day. What did it say? Diddy closed his eyes as if the memory was too powerful to face head-on. It said, "Stop running, my son, come home." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. The tenderness in Diddy's voice as he repeated them was almost overwhelming. I broke down right there on the plane. 33 years of suppressed emotion just came pouring out. I cried for hours. My security team thought I was having some kind of breakdown. But for the first time in decades, I felt. Diddy opened his eyes and looked directly at Marcus. Peace. That's when I knew I had to tell the truth. Not just to myself, but to everyone. I've been living a lie for so long that I forgot who I really am underneath all the success and the image. Marcus could see the weight lifting from Diddy's shoulders as he spoke. And who are you underneath all that? I'm a broken man who's been desperately searching for God his entire life, but was too proud to admit it. The admission hung in the air like a sacred moment. Marcus could see that Diddy was just getting started, that there were deeper layers to this story that needed to be told. You have to understand, Diddy said, his voice more steady now. I built my entire identity around being the ultimate hustler, the self-made man. I made my reputation on grinding, on making something from nothing, on measurable success. Admitting I believe in God, that I've always believed in God, felt like professional suicide. Marcus nodded, understanding the impossible position Diddy had put himself in. But the truth is, every major decision I've made, every big risk I've taken, I've been praying about it, secretly, quietly, but praying nonetheless. Diddy's confession was picking up speed now, as if a dam had broken and the water was rushing out. When I was building Bad Boy Records, I prayed for wisdom. When I was launching new artists, I prayed for guidance. When I was facing my darkest business moments, I prayed for strength. But you never talked about it publicly? Never. I was terrified of being seen as weak, or worse, as some kind of religious fanatic. The hip-hop world doesn't have much patience for faith. Diddy looked directly at the camera. But I realized now that I was the one without patience. I was impatient with God's timing, impatient with not having all the answers, impatient with the mystery of faith. Marcus leaned back, processing the enormity of what he was hearing. When did you first start feeling this conflict? Honestly, the moment I achieved my first real success. You'd think success would make the spiritual questions go away, but it made them louder. The more I accomplished, the emptier I felt inside. It was like trying to fill a God-shaped hole with achievements and recognition. Diddy's voice grew quieter, more reflective. I started having panic attacks in my 20s, not about business or failure, but about meaning, about whether my life mattered in any eternal sense. I'd wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, always 3 o'clock in the morning, just like that night when I was 7, and feel this overwhelming sense that I was wasting my life, running from the one thing that could actually fulfill me. Did you ever try to seek help? I tried therapy, meditation, philosophy. I read every book I could find about consciousness and the meaning of life, but nothing filled that void except prayer. When I prayed, even though I was pretending I didn't believe in what I was doing, I felt peace. But the moment I stopped praying, the emptiness came back worse than before. Marcus could see the internal war that had been raging inside Diddy for decades. That must have been incredibly isolating. It was. I felt like I was living a double life. In public, I was the confident mogul who had all the answers. In private, I was on my knees every night, begging God to tell me what I was supposed to do with my life. Diddy paused, looking down at his hands. The worst part was, I think God was trying to answer me the whole time. I just wasn't ready to listen. What do you mean? Every breakthrough, every moment of inspiration, every time I solved a problem that seemed impossible, I felt this presence with me, this guidance that was beyond my own intelligence or capabilities. But I kept attributing it to luck, or hard work, or natural talent. I couldn't admit that just maybe, I was being led. The vulnerability in Diddy's voice was stunning. Marcus realized he was watching a man strip away decades of carefully constructed defenses. There's something else, Diddy said, looking up with fresh tears in his eyes. Something that happened 2 days ago that made me realize I couldn't keep this secret anymore. Marcus felt his heart racing. Each revelation had been more shocking than the last, and he sensed that whatever Diddy was about to share would be the most profound yet. 2 days ago, I was at my office in Manhattan, working late as usual. It was around midnight, and I was alone in the building except for security. Diddy's voice was barely above a whisper now. I was reviewing some contracts when I felt this overwhelming urge to pray. Not just a quick prayer, but really pray. Get on my knees and have a real conversation with God. Marcus leaned forward, completely absorbed. So I did. I locked my office door, got down on my knees, and I just talked. I told God everything about my fears, about my emptiness, about how tired I was of pretending to have everything figured out. I told him about that night when I was 7, about the voice on the plane, about the 40 years I'd spent running. Diddy's hands were trembling as he spoke, and then I asked him the question that had been burning in my heart for decades. What do you want from me? What am I supposed to do with this life you've given me? The studio was so quiet that the sound of the air conditioning seemed deafening. I waited in that silence for what felt like hours. And then, Marcus, I heard it again. That same voice from when I was 7, but clearer this time, more present. What did he say? Diddy closed his eyes, and when he spoke, his voice was filled with a mixture of awe and terror. He said, "Tell them about me. Tell them that I'm real, that I'm here, that I'm waiting for them just like I waited for you. Use the platform I've given you to point them home." The words hit Marcus like a physical force. The implications were staggering. I argued with him. Diddy continued, opening his eyes. I told him I wasn't qualified, that I'd mess it up, that people would think I'd lost my mind. But he just kept saying the same thing. Tell them about me. Marcus struggled to find his voice. And that's why you're here, doing this interview? That's why I'm here. This is me being obedient for the first time in my adult life. This is me finally stopping the running and saying yes to what God has been asking me to do for 40 years. The weight of the moment was overwhelming. Marcus realized he wasn't just conducting an interview anymore. He was witnessing a public testimony, a moment of spiritual surrender that would ripple through the world. I know this is going to change everything, Diddy said, looking directly at the camera. I know people are going to question my sanity, my credibility, my fitness to lead, but I can't live with the lie anymore. I can't pretend that my success is just about hustle and talent when I know deep in my heart that every breakthrough, every moment of clarity, every solution to an impossible problem has come from something beyond myself. Marcus felt tears welling up in his own eyes. What are you hoping will happen when this interview airs? I'm hoping that just maybe someone watching this will recognize themselves in my story. Someone who's been running from God. Someone who's been trying to fill that void with success or money or recognition. Someone who's been afraid to admit that just maybe they need something bigger than themselves. Diddy's voice grew stronger, more confident. I'm hoping that maybe this will give them permission to stop running too, to get on their knees and have that conversation they've been avoiding, to ask the questions they've been too afraid to ask. The transformation in Diddy was remarkable. The man who had started the interview as a carefully controlled public figure had become someone completely different, raw, honest, and utterly human. "There's one more thing I need to say," Diddy said, his voice now filled with a peace that hadn't been there at the beginning of the interview. Marcus waited, knowing that whatever came next would be the culmination of everything they'd shared. "I want to talk directly to the people watching this," Diddy said, turning to face the camera fully. "I want to talk to the artists and the executives and the entrepreneurs who are struggling with the same thing I've been struggling with. I want to talk to the people who have achieved everything they thought they wanted and still feel empty inside." His voice carried a conviction that was unmistakable. "You're not crazy for feeling like something is missing. You're not weak for wondering if there's more to life than what you can see and measure and achieve. You're not broken for feeling this longing for something transcendent, something eternal." Marcus watched as Diddy seemed to grow more confident with each word, as if speaking these truths was giving him strength he'd never known he possessed. "For 40 years, I told myself that faith was the enemy of ambition, that believing in God would make me less driven, less capable, less successful, but I was wrong. Faith doesn't diminish ambition, it completes it. Faith doesn't make you weak, it makes you brave enough to admit you don't have all the answers." Diddy leaned forward, speaking with the urgency of someone who finally understood his purpose. "I've spent decades building an empire, creating culture, launching careers, and I still believe that work is important, but I realize now that we can't hustle our way out of the human condition. We can't achieve our way past the fundamental questions of existence. We can't solve the longing in our hearts with platinum plaques and business deals and red carpet moments." The passion in his voice was building to a crescendo. "We need God. We need to acknowledge that we were created by someone who loves us, someone who has a purpose for us, someone who's been waiting patiently for us to stop running and come home." Marcus felt the power of Diddy's words reverberating through the studio. This wasn't just a personal confession anymore, it was a sermon, a call to action, an invitation to spiritual awakening. I know some of you are watching this and thinking I've lost my mind. You're wondering how someone who's built their career on hustle and ambition can suddenly start talking about God and faith and spiritual experiences. You're thinking this is some kind of breakdown or publicity stunt. Diddy's voice softened, becoming more intimate. "I understand that reaction, because I would have had the same reaction 3 weeks ago. But I'm asking you to consider the possibility that maybe, just maybe, the breakdown is actually a breakthrough. Maybe the moment when you admit you don't have all the answers is the moment when you become open to finding the real answers." He paused, letting the words sink in. "I'm not asking you to believe in my experience. I'm asking you to be honest about your own experience. Be honest about the emptiness you feel despite your success. Be honest about the questions that keep you awake at night. Be honest about the longing in your heart for something more than what this world has to offer." The vulnerability in Diddy's voice was breathtaking. "And if you're honest about those things, if you're brave enough to admit that maybe you need God, then I'm asking you to do what I finally did 2 days ago. Get on your knees and pray, not to impress anyone, not to follow some religious formula, but to have a real conversation with the God who created you, who loves you, and who's been waiting your whole life for you to come home." Marcus realized he was witnessing something unprecedented, a public figure using their platform not to promote themselves or their achievements, but to point people towards something infinitely greater. In that moment, Sean Combs had become something more than an entertainment mogul. He had become a messenger, carrying a truth that had the power to transform not just his own life, but the lives of everyone listening. The interview was over, but the real story, the story of redemption, of coming home, of finding the one thing that could fill the God-shaped void in every human heart, was just beginning.